Have you ever fallen for someone who seemed completely out of reach and yet saw a part of you that even you had forgotten? What if the most powerful man in the room, cold, calculated, unreachable, was the one person who quietly needed you the most? And what if you were just the assistant, overlooked, underestimated, and unexpectedly drawn into a story where every glance, every silence, and every small moment mattered more than you ever imagined? Would you stay knowing that love might only exist in the quiet corners of someone else's life? Or would you walk away to finally find your own voice? This is not just a story of romance. It's about choosing yourself, even when your heart wants to stay. About standing still long enough for someone to catch up, not with grand gestures, but with real change. So, what would you do? Let's find out together. If this story speaks to something in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that echo the loudest. Now, let's begin. If Hannah Blake had followed her better judgment, she would have never printed that resume. It was late September, the kind of gray morning where Chicago felt like a city trying too hard to be something else, colder, louder, faster. She had just turned 29, newly unemployed, 3 months behind on rent, and one coffee spill away from a minor breakdown. So when her roommate, Annie, tossed a crumpled job listing across the kitchen table with a "you should totally apply," Hannah didn't laugh. She blinked, sighed, and said, to that place, Glass Rock Tower loomed over the downtown skyline like a fortress of ambition. Everyone knew its top floors were reserved for the elite, the exact kind of people who sipped $9 lattes and talked in acronyms. More importantly, everyone knew about Calder Reed, the infamous CEO, whose last 5 executive assistants hadn't lasted past a month. Some didn't even make it past the first week. One had reportedly quit mid-meeting and taken the elevator down 52 floors without her shoes. Hannah read the listing anyway. It was vague, impersonal, seeking executive administrative support. Must be punctual, composed under pressure, excellent with written communication, discretion essential. It might as well have read, "Wanted sacrificial lamb." "What are you thinking?" Annie asked, watching her expression shift. "I'm thinking I don't own a single outfit that doesn't have cat hair. I'm serious. Han, you're brilliant. You just hide it too well. And you're not going to find magic stuck in this apartment rereading rejection emails." That part stung, because it was true. Ever since the publishing house she'd worked for downsized, Hannah had spent weeks waiting for something worthy to show up. But nothing was coming. Just bills, dust, and silence. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll apply. But I'm not ironing pants for it." She didn't expect to get a call. Not from the assistant to the assistant or anyone in HR. But when the phone rang a few days later and a cool, clipped voice said, "Mr. Reed would like to see you tomorrow morning at 8:15. Hannah dropped the spoon into her cereal. "You mean the Mr. Reed?" A pause. "Yes. Be punctual." Click. Annie poked her head out from the bedroom. "You look like you just saw a ghost. I think I just agreed to be eaten alive." The lobby of Glass Rock Tower was more of a whisper than a building. Marble floors that echoed even the softest step, polished brass trim, and security personnel with the emotional range of a granite statue. The receptionist looked up from her computer like Hannah had personally offended her. "Name Hannah Blake. I'm here for the Mr. Reed is on the 52nd floor." She handed her a pass and buzzed the elevator without a smile. By the time Hannah stepped inside the elevator, her palms were damp. She wore her only blazer, the one she'd worn to her mother's memorial 2 years ago, and shoes that pinched, but looked expensive enough to pretend. The elevator dinged softly at each floor, like a countdown. She took a shaky breath at 49. At 51, she checked her teeth in the mirrored panel. At 52, the door slid open into what looked like an entirely different dimension. The reception desk gleamed like glass. A wall of windows spilled morning light across polished floors. Two women in silk blouses glanced up as Hannah stepped out. One arched an eyebrow, so high it practically touched her hairline. "You're early," the younger one said. "That's unusual." Before Hannah could reply, a voice called from down the hall, "Send her in." The women exchanged a look, something between pity and amusement, before gesturing Hannah toward a hallway. She walked slowly, aware of the echo of her steps. Her heart pounded like a timpani. Then she saw him. Calder Reed stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, back straight, one hand in his pocket. He turned slowly, and his gaze landed on her like a spotlight. He was younger than she expected, maybe mid-30s. Clean-shaven, suit so perfectly tailored it could have been sculpted, and his eyes cool, stormy gray, didn't blink. "Hannah Blake," he said. "You're 5 minutes early. I figured better than 5 minutes late." No smile, not even a twitch. "Have a seat." She obeyed, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than her car. He didn't look at her resume, didn't ask for it. He just stood there, watching her like a puzzle with missing pieces. "Why apply for this job?" he asked. "I didn't," she replied, honest before she could filter it. "My roommate did. I just showed up." He blinked once. She couldn't read him. Not even a flicker. And yet, here you are. Seems so. A pause. A long one. Calder finally moved toward his desk, picked up a thick file. "You have a degree in communications. Creative writing minor. Spent 4 years at a publishing firm. Until it folded. You were laid off." "No. I quit before they could let me go. Figured I'd rather fall on my own terms." Something flickered in his eyes. Approval or disbelief. "Most people lie in interviews. You're doing the opposite. I find it takes too much effort to be anyone else." Another silence. Calder tapped the file once, then looked up. "You start Monday. 7:45. Sharp." Her breath caught. "Wait, you're hiring me. I don't do interviews. I do instincts. Mine says you'll be useful until you aren't." "Wow," she whispered. "That's almost warm." He narrowed his eyes. "Don't push your luck." "Ms. Blake?" She stood, nodded, and turned to leave. But at the door, she paused. "Just so we're clear, I don't break easily. You might outlast me, but I won't go quietly." Calder's lips twitched. Almost a smile. "We'll see." Monday arrived with a wind that howled between the steel bones of Chicago, flinging dried leaves down the sidewalks like forgotten memories. Hannah Blake stood in front of Glass Rock Tower at exactly 7:30 a.m., holding a paper cup of coffee and rehearsing calming breaths like some ancient ritual. Her blazer itched. Her hair wouldn't lie flat. Her stomach had been flipping since 5 a.m. The revolving doors parted with a mechanical sigh, and she stepped into the immaculate lobby once again. But today, she was no visitor. Today, she belonged, at least for now. The elevator to the 52nd floor was already half full, packed with people in suits who looked as if they'd never known a bad hair day or a public transit delay. She tried to shrink into the corner, balancing her coffee and shoulder bag until someone accidentally nudged her elbow. And just like that, the lid popped off. A dark brown splash erupted across the sleeve of her white blouse and dripped unceremoniously down the front. No. No. No, she muttered under her breath, grabbing a tissue from her bag. The executive next to her gave her a glance of mild pity, then returned to scrolling through his phone. By the time the elevator doors opened, her blouse looked like an abstract painting. She hurried down the hall, cheeks flushed, praying for invisibility. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. As she turned the corner toward Calder Reed's office, she collided with something or someone solid. Her coffee, what was left of it, launched into the air with theatrical flair. A gasp escaped her lips as the hot splash landed directly onto a dark gray suit. The man stepped back, eyes narrowing, the stain blooming like a flower across his chest. "Oh no, oh my God, I'm so sorry," Hannah stammered, scrambling for napkins she didn't have. "I didn't see you." Then she looked up. Storm gray eyes, perfect jaw, controlled fury simmering just beneath the surface. Of course, it had to be Calder Reed. She froze. For a split second, the office went still. Several assistants nearby stopped typing. A courier who had just entered the hallway stopped mid-step. Even the plants looked tense. "I guess this isn't how most people start a Monday," Hannah offered weakly. Calder stared at her, not moving, not blinking. "This was a custom suit," he said, voice even but dangerously low. "I believe it now has extra flavor," she replied before she could stop herself. "Colombian roast, bold finish." A silence thicker than the Chicago fog hung between them. And then so faint it could have been imagined something shifted in Calder's expression. Not a smile. No, not quite. But a flicker of incredulous restraint. "Do you always speak this much, Ms. Blake?" he asked. "Only when I'm nervous, or hungry, or awake?" Another pause. "Get inside," he said finally, turning away. The office was the kind of minimalist luxury that whispered wealth, sleek wood, leather chairs. A wall of glass overlooking Lake Michigan, where the morning sun struggled through thin clouds. Calder walked behind his desk and folded his arms. "You're not what I expected." Hannah set her bag down gently, trying to steady her voice. "I get that a lot. I reviewed your file again this morning. Your references are excellent. Too excellent for someone who spills coffee before 8 Well, I like to make an impression." He stared at her, unreadable. "You will be responsible for all written communications, internal and external. I don't tolerate typos, delays, or personal drama. You'll be managing calendars, presentations, and assisting with investor relations. Sounds like a full-time relationship. You'll find I'm not charming, Ms. Blake. I'm not here for charm. I'm here because the rent's due." Something flickered behind his eyes again. Curiosity. Maybe. Or amusement buried too deep to show. "Your first task," he said, sliding a folder toward her, "is to rework this investor deck for our partners in Seattle. Their culture values subtlety and emotional intelligence. Two things our current pitch lacks. Let me guess, Hannah said, flipping through the slides. This was written by men who think synergy is a love language. He didn't respond, just watched her. She closed the folder. Give me the day. You have until 4. No pressure? All pressure, he corrected. The hours passed in a blur of typing, erasing, rewriting. Hannah worked from a small desk just outside his glass office, headphones in, blocking the world out. She ate a granola bar for lunch and spilled part of it on her keyboard. No one noticed. At 3:58 p.m., she printed the revised slides and walked them in. Calder read them in silence. The only sound was the ticking of the old brass clock on his bookshelf. When he looked up, his expression was neutral. But his words were not. This is better. Hannah blinked. Better. It's not brilliant. But it doesn't make me want to throw my laptop into the lake. That's progress. Well, that's the dream, she replied with a grin. He closed the folder and looked at her for a long moment. I don't know what to make of you yet. You will, she said quietly. Then she turned and walked out. That night, as she collapsed onto her couch back home, shoes kicked off and hair down, Hannah opened her laptop and typed a single sentence into her private journal. Day 1 survived the storm. Let's see what tomorrow brews. For someone with no formal architectural training, Hannah Blake had a remarkable eye for space. Or perhaps it wasn't skill, just a tendency to notice things others didn't. The way light hit the corner of Calder Reed's office each morning, casting angled shadows like the inside of a sundial. The barely there scuff mark near the edge of his bookshelf, where a chair must have scraped too hard. The fact that his desk, immaculate and precisely arranged, held no personal photos. Not even one. She noticed that on her third morning. She also noticed the silence. Not the polite hush of an office filled with focused professionals. No. Glassrock's top floor carried a different kind of quiet one that felt studied, as though people had learned to speak only when absolutely necessary. And when they did, it was in hushed tones and perfect grammar. I thought hedge funds were loud, she mumbled once to herself. Only when they fail. A voice behind her said. She turned to see Jordan Patel, head of strategy, standing at the copier with a crooked smile and tired eyes. People here talk like they're afraid the walls have ears, Hannah said. They don't. The walls have Calder. Jordan gave a knowing shrug. Same thing. By week 2, Hannah had learned the rhythm of the floor, the 7:55 up, silence before Calder's arrival. The 8:01 burst of activity after his shoes tapped across the marble. The way his mood seemed to determine the temperature of the air. Some days were frost, others controlled storms. But what intrigued her most wasn't his power, it was his precision. Everything in his life, down to his coffee order, double espresso, 1 sugar, stirred counterclockwise, was methodical, efficient, predictable. Everything but the box. She first noticed it during a late-night task on Wednesday. Calder had asked her to locate an old contract, buried deep in the archives of his digital files. She knocked gently on his office door and found him gone. A rare occurrence. His desk was open, a file drawer slightly ajar. And in that drawer, tucked beneath folders marked with harsh black font, was a small wooden box, smooth, worn, completely out of place in a room built of glass and steel. She didn't open it. She just stared at it, a moment too long, before backing away. The next morning, Calder was quieter than usual. Not cold, not rude, just distant. His responses were curt, but not sharp. His eyes trained on the horizon outside his window more often than his screen. At noon, he called her in. "I need you to prepare a draft email for our Tokyo partners," he said, handing her a few notes. "Be mindful of tone. They're formal, and they read between the lines." "I can do that," Hannah replied, taking the pages. He didn't dismiss her right away. Instead, he studied her for a moment. "Why are you really here, Ms. Blake?" The question landed like a soft thud. She blinked. "You mean at Glass Rock? I mean here. With me. In this role." She considered pretending she didn't understand, but something in his gaze told her to drop the act. "I guess. Because I'm better at cleaning up other people's messes than my own," she said. "And because it's easier to ghostwrite someone else's power than to reclaim my own." Calder was silent. Then he said something unexpected. "I used to write." That pulled her attention. "You?" He nodded once. "Essays, short fiction. When I was younger, before the machine." "What happened?" He looked away. "Deadlines, expectations, board meetings. At some point, the stories stopped coming." "And did you miss them?" He didn't answer. But Hannah saw something shift behind his eyes. A flicker of something unspoken. That evening, long after most of the floor had emptied, Calder passed her desk on his way out. He paused. "You're different," he said. She looked up from her screen. "You say that like it's a warning, more like an observation." "I take it as a compliment." He tilted his head. "Most people would. Just be careful not to mistake your value for your visibility." Hannah let that sink in. "And what do you mistake your silence for?" He didn't reply, just walked away. Friday came with gray skies and wind that tugged at the city like it was trying to peel something away. Hannah arrived early, brought her own tea this time, and kept her head down. But around mid-morning, Calder surprised her. "You're scribbling again," he said as he passed her desk. She instinctively covered her small leather-bound notebook. "It's nothing. I detest lies more than incompetence." She stared at him, then slowly slid it toward him. He didn't sit, just flipped it open and skimmed. The floor whispers. The glass holds secrets. He looks out the window like he's waiting for something to give him permission to breathe. Calder looked up. "Are you always this poetic about your job?" "No," Hannah said softly. "Just about the people no one really sees." There was a long silence. Then he closed the notebook and handed it back. "You have a sharp mind," he said, "but you'll need sharper focus." Was that a compliment? It was an instruction. But something about the moment felt like more. That afternoon, she submitted the Tokyo draft. 2 hours later, Calder returned it with a single word in red ink, solid. For anyone else, it would have sounded lukewarm. From him, it felt like a standing ovation. That night, she wrote, "He lives like the tide steady, pulled by forces he won't name. But even oceans change with the moon." She didn't know if he would ever read that line, but part of her hoped he would. Friday afternoon had barely settled when the message came through. Hannah looked up from her computer. half dazed from spreadsheet edits, as the notification chimed quietly on her screen. Pack a weekend bag, flight at 6:30 p.m. Logan Gate 42. Bring the Tokyo files. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. No one else messaged like that. No greeting, no pleasantries, just a command, as clean and clipped as the man himself. She blinked, rereading the line twice, then called out. Called her. No response. His office was empty. She reread the message. Weekend bag. Her heart did a little dance she didn't approve of. Was this a work trip? Of course it was. She was his assistant, not his date. But still. She hadn't packed for ambiguity in months. The airport was a sea of bodies and announcements. Every gate a chorus of engines and voices. Hannah moved quickly through security, her mind stuck somewhere between practical and panicked. She spotted him near the terminal, sitting alone, navy jacket slung over one arm, reading something on his phone. He didn't look up as she approached. You made it, he said, eyes still on the screen. You're surprised, only that you found the gate. Most assistants get lost on the first trip. I'm not most assistants. That earned her the ghost of a smirk. So I'm learning. The plane wasn't just any flight. It was private. Italian leather seats. Polished wood trim. A space so silent it felt sacred. Your first time on one of these, Calder asked, glancing at her as she buckled in. I'm still not convinced I didn't walk onto someone's fantasy. He didn't respond, but she caught the way his fingers flexed once on the armrest, like maybe her presence unsettled something. Not in a bad way, just unfamiliar. For a while, they didn't speak. He reviewed documents, and she watched the clouds. The silence was surprisingly comfortable. Then he asked, Why do you write in that notebook? She turned. Because the words have to go somewhere. That's vague. It's the only way I can name things I don't understand. Like she hesitated. Like people. Silence. The way someone looks out a window when they think no one's watching. His gaze flicked toward her. Sharp, but not unkind. You write about me. Sometimes. He nodded once, then returned to his documents. But the air had changed. The hotel was nestled on the edge of a lake in New Hampshire, a place so quiet it didn't seem to belong to the world of mergers and market shares. The receptionist, polished and polite, handed Calder a single key card. I believe your assistant will find the sofa bed comfortable, she said. Hannah froze. I requested 2 rooms, Calder said, his voice steady. I'm sorry, sir. There was an overbooking issue. Before Hannah could speak, he turned to her. Is that a problem? She shook her head. I've slept on worse. At least this one doesn't come with rent. He gave her a look she couldn't interpret, then handed her the card. The suite was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a panoramic view of pine-covered hills dusted in gold from the setting sun. A fire crackled quietly in the hearth. Hannah dropped her bag by the couch. Nice prison cell. Calder walked to the window, arms folded. Not every box is a prison. Ms. Blake. She tilted her head. Depends who's inside. They didn't talk much over dinner. Business was discussed numbers, names, presentations. But underneath it all was a current neither dared name. Later, she stepped out onto the balcony, the mountain air sharp and still. The stars above looked close enough to touch. You're awake, came a voice behind her, She turned. Calder was barefoot, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, collar open. He looked real. Less CEO, more man. I don't sleep well in new places, she said. Me either. They stood in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't push, but gently surrounds. Why finance, she asked eventually. He didn't look at her. Legacy? Expectation? I was good at it. Do you love it? No. Then why stay? His jaw tightened. Because sometimes surviving means choosing what you're good at, not what you love. She didn't respond right away. Then she said, that's not surviving. That's disappearing slowly. He turned to her, something raw flickering in his eyes. What do you love? Hannah. She smiled, small and sad. Words, but they don't always love me back. He stepped closer. The space between them charged now, humming with something fragile and real. Then maybe you've been giving them to the wrong people, he said. And then it happened. A kiss, soft, questioning, a breath drawn between storms. Her hands on his shirt, his fingers brushing her cheek like she might vanish. It didn't last forever. It didn't need to. It was enough to know it happened. She pulled away first. This is a mistake. He looked at her. Unreadable. Why? Because I won't be another comma in your story. Calder. His expression darkened. I don't do stories. Exactly, she whispered. That's the problem. She turned, walked into the suite, and closed the door gently behind her. And on the other side, Calder stood still in the starlight, unsure whether he'd just lost something or finally found the courage to chase it. By Monday morning, everything had gone back to normal. Or at least, that's what both of them pretended. Hannah Blake arrived at Glass Rock Tower exactly at 7:45 blazer crisp, hair tied back, a thermos of coffee clutched in one hand like a shield. She took the elevator up in silence, past the usual nods from colleagues who now eyed her with an extra layer of curiosity, and settled at her desk like nothing had changed. Except everything had. Because now there were memories. A balcony, a sky full of stars, a kiss that felt like it had been waiting in the wings of every conversation they'd shared. She hadn't told anyone, not even Annie. Not because she was ashamed, but because she didn't know what to call it. What do you name something that might not exist the next morning? Calder hadn't mentioned it either. He had arrived 15 minutes after her. No nod, no lingering glance, just business as usual. His words were clipped, precise, as if their lips had never touched, as if he hadn't looked at her like she was the only fixed star in his orbit. So she adapted. She reverted to her role. She printed agendas, responded to emails, and helped prepare for the week's board presentation. She even added a touch of dry humor to one of the internal memos. He didn't comment on it, but he didn't delete it either. Small victories. But when she left the office that night, her chest felt hollow. Words gathered at the edge of her tongue, then dissolved before they could become real. Tuesday brought new energy. Calder stood at her desk around mid-morning, a thick folder in hand. You're going to be writing something bigger. She raised an eyebrow. Define bigger. An op-ed. For the Financial Register? I've been invited to write a piece about global leadership strategy. But I don't have time or the tone, and you want me to be your voice. He didn't flinch. You already are. The admission landed like a stone in water rippling outward. Hannah opened the folder. Inside were bullet points, scattered notes in his sharp handwriting, a draft that was more outline than substance. "It's due Thursday," he said. "Think you can shape this?" She looked up. "Do you want honesty or polish both?" "Always." She paused. "Then I'll need to hear what's not written down." He nodded once. After hours. That evening, the office had emptied, leaving behind only the soft hum of copy machines on sleep mode and the occasional distant elevator chime. Calder stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms, staring out at the city like it might offer him the answer he hadn't yet found. "I'm not used to being interpreted," he said as she entered. "Well, I'm not used to ghostwriting CEOs, so I guess we're even." He offered the faintest smile. She set her notebook down, opened a blank page. "Tell me what you really think about leadership." Not the board-friendly answer. He was quiet for a long time. "Then leadership is loneliness. Most days, everyone expects clarity from you, even when you're drowning in doubt." She nodded slowly, scribbling. What else? He turned, eyes darker than usual. "It's watching people around you burn out because they're too afraid to say no, because you set that tone. And do you regret that?" "Sometimes." He crossed his arms. "But regret has never fixed a company?" "No, but it fixes people." Their eyes met, and just like that, the conversation shifted, words giving way to silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full, charged. He stepped closer. She didn't step back. "I keep thinking about the balcony," he said quietly. "So do I. But we haven't talked about it." "No." She agreed. "Because talking about it would make it real. And that scares you. It terrifies me." He searched her face. "Why?" "Because I've been someone's secret before. And I don't want to live in someone else's margins again." He didn't answer right away. To write. Then, slowly, he reached into his inner jacket pocket and handed her a folded paper. Her name was on it, handwritten in ink she recognized. She opened it. It was a draft, a beautifully composed letter addressed to the editor of the Financial Register, praising the eloquence and authenticity of Hannah's voice. At the bottom, a note from Calder. "If they like what they read, I want them to know who wrote it." Her breath caught. "You're not hiding me," she asked. "I'm asking you to stop hiding yourself." She looked at him for a long moment, notebook forgotten in her lap. "You confuse the hell out of me. That makes two of us." He stepped away then, back to his desk. The moment didn't shatter, but it softened, like clay after rain, malleable, changeable. By Wednesday evening, the article was finished. It was sharp, insightful, and layered with just enough vulnerability to feel human. Hannah had written it in bursts on the train, in her kitchen, once even in the stairwell outside her apartment, because the words wouldn't wait. She dropped the final draft on Calder's desk, then hovered, uncertain. He picked it up, read silently. When he finished, he looked up. "You've made me sound like someone worth listening to." "You are." He paused. "Or maybe you just know how to find the words I buried." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. That night, alone in her apartment, she opened her notebook again. Maybe it's not the kiss we remember, but the space between it and the silence that followed. Maybe it's the ache of almost. And beneath that, she wrote something she hadn't dared before I think I'm falling for the man behind the silence. And that might be the most dangerous sentence I've ever written. Thursday morning arrived unusually quiet. The type of quiet that wrapped around the office like fog soft, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore. Hannah Blake sensed it the moment she stepped out of the elevator onto the 52nd floor. The usual click of heels, the subdued whispers, even the sound of phones ringing, they were all off, muted. She walked to her desk, sensing eyes following her. Jordan Patel passed her without a joke or even a smile. That, in itself, was a warning bell. Before she could sit down, her email pinged. Please bring your notes on the Zurich report. Conference room B. Now. Calder Reed didn't use punctuation often. But when he did like that period after now, it meant something had shifted. She grabbed her folder and headed toward the West Wing, where high-level meetings took place. As she reached the glass conference room, she paused, because sitting at the table across from Calder was a woman, tall, poised. Dark auburn hair swept back into a perfect chignon, red dress that said confidence without apology, diamond earrings that didn't just sparkle, they declared, and eyes that turned the moment Hannah entered, scanning her like a barcode. Ah, the woman said smoothly. You must be the new assistant. Hannah's stomach dropped before Calder even opened his mouth. Hannah, he said evenly. This is Miranda Shore. Of course, the Miranda. Ex-fiancée. Political heiress. Fashion darling. The woman who had once been Calder's +1 to every gala, his partner in legacy, until she suddenly wasn't. Hannah swallowed. Pleasure to meet you. Miranda's smile didn't reach her eyes. Oh, the pleasure's mine. Calder's been quite animated lately. I assumed it was a new business strategy, but now I see its inspiration. Calder's jaw twitched. Miranda is considering a return to the board. Not considering. Miranda corrected. Confirming. Daddy's shares make it inevitable. You know. Hannah nodded politely, then turned to Calder. Zurich report. He handed her the folder without breaking eye contact. Reschedule the 2 p.m. with Bennett and Cole, and the leadership lunch cancel it. Miranda chuckled, leaning back in her chair. So abrupt. I suppose that's what makes you magnetic. Hannah left the room without slamming the door. But she wanted to. She made it to the stairwell before the first breath shook. She wasn't crying, not exactly, but her chest felt tight, like the room had been vacuum sealed around her. She had no claim over Calder. No promises, no labels, no declarations. But still seeing Miranda sit there like she never left, like she owned the oxygen in that room, made something fragile inside Hannah flinch. When she returned to her desk, Jordan dropped a coffee beside her. I saw the face, he said gently. Didn't need to hear the words. She's back, and I'm trying not to overreact. Jordan nodded. You're doing a poor job. She smiled weakly. Noted. At 6, when most of the office had cleared, Calder emerged from the West Wing. His shirt was wrinkled, tie loose, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had spent all day fighting shadows. Hannah, he said, voice low. Walk with me. She hesitated, then stood. They didn't talk as they made their way down the stairwell and out into the early evening. The city buzzed quietly, lights blinking on like stars testing the sky. Finally, Calder said, I didn't know she was coming. You don't owe me explanations. Yes, I do. She stopped walking. Do you want her back? He blinked. No. Does she want you back? A long pause. Yes. And she's good at wanting what looks right on paper, and you're good at giving people what they expect, Hannah said quietly. He didn't deny it. They stood in silence near the Riverwalk, traffic rumbling a block away, the breeze tugging at the edges of his coat. I don't know what you're to me yet, he admitted. But you're not invisible. And you're not replaceable. Then tell her that. I already did. She looked at him for a long moment. Then maybe tell me, too. When they returned upstairs, Miranda was still in his office, reclining in one of the guest chairs like she'd never left. Oh, good, she said with a gleam. You're back. I was beginning to worry I'd have to send out a search party. Don't wait up, Calder said, not slowing his step. We're done for tonight. Miranda's eyes narrowed. But we've only just begun. Darling. The week after Miranda Shore re-entered Calder Reed's life unfolded like a silent film. There were no confrontations, no slammed doors or raised voices, just a steady shifting of atmosphere, like the barometric pressure before a storm. And in the middle of it all was Hannah Blake, still showing up, still doing the job, still pretending it didn't get harder each day to sit just outside his office without wondering who he was when she wasn't around. The op-ed they wrote together was published on Tuesday. It exploded online within hours, shared by CEOs, quoted in newsletters, and dissected in podcast episodes. Calder's inbox was a storm of praise, but every compliment came laced with a subtle sting. Who wrote this? This doesn't sound like you. And it didn't. Because for once, it sounded human. That evening, after the last meeting cleared, Calder appeared at her desk with 2 takeout containers. Dinner, he asked, holding one out. She hesitated. You always offer food when something's wrong. He set the box down. Then I suppose I offer food a lot. They sat in silence for a while, eating on opposite sides of the long conference table. The view of the city blinked back at them, indifferent to their awkward quiet. Finally, Hannah asked, So, is Miranda here to stay? She's taking a temporary seat on the board, Calder said, without looking up. And are you okay with that? I don't know yet. She nodded, picked at her noodles. I should have warned you, he added, about her. You didn't owe me that. I think I did. Silence again, but heavier this time, like both of them were trying to swallow something too large. You know what scares me? Hannah said, surprising herself. Calder looked up. Being temporary, she said, not just in jobs, in lives, in people's minds. I've been someone's for now before. I don't want to do that again. He closed his container slowly. You're not for now, he said, but I'm not forever either, am I? He didn't answer. And the silence spoke louder than words ever could. That night, Hannah didn't sleep. She lay in bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling, replaying every glance, every unfinished sentence, every time she'd hoped he might reach for her and simply say, I want this. I want you. But Calder Reed didn't make declarations. He calculated, hesitated, and guarded himself like a man who had been betrayed too many times to leave the door open again. And maybe, just maybe, that's what hurt the most, that even after everything, she still wasn't inside the door. The next morning, Hannah arrived to find a manila envelope on her desk. No note, no label. Inside was a printed version of the op-ed. But this time, her name was at the bottom, by Calder Reed and Hannah Blake. Her breath caught. She stared at it for a long moment before placing it gently back in the envelope. She didn't cry. She smiled. Small, sad, because it was the most beautiful gesture he'd ever made. And it came too late. Later that afternoon, she stepped into Calder's office. He was reviewing quarterly reports, eyes tired but focused. "I saw the article," she said. He looked up. It was overdue. She nodded. "Thank you." He leaned back in his chair. "You don't seem happy?" "I am." A beat of silence. But I'm not sure what to do with it," she said. "Because I don't know what this is anymore." Calder looked at her, really looked at her, like he might say something profound, but all he said was, "I don't either." She took a breath. "I think I need space." The words hovered. Calder's jaw tightened. "Space to leave, space to remember who I am when I'm not orbiting you." He didn't fight it, didn't beg, didn't plead, just nodded. And that, more than anything, nearly broke her. That night, she walked home through the city, past the glowing shop fronts, the clinking glass of rooftop bars, the quiet corners of bookstores still open late. She stopped by the river and pulled out her notebook. Maybe love isn't loud. Maybe it's the soft ache of wanting more and settling for half. Maybe it's the silence we pretend doesn't hurt. She closed the cover gently and kept walking. The rain began around midnight, soft at first, a quiet tapping against the windows of Hannah Blake's apartment, like fingers too shy to knock. By 3 a.m., it had become a storm, a relentless, thrumming downpour that matched the chaos inside her chest. The letter sat on her desk. Not an email, not a draft, not a memo. A letter, on real paper, folded, addressed in her handwriting to Calder Reed. She had written it in one sitting. No edits, no rewrites, just the truth. She stared at it now like it might catch fire if she blinked too hard. Her fingers hovered above the envelope, trembling slightly. But she didn't touch it again. She'd said everything already, in the morning. She left earlier than usual, before even the janitorial staff arrived at Glass Rock Tower. She placed the letter on Calder's desk, exactly centered. No name tag, no post-it, just there. Then she walked out of the office and kept walking. She didn't say goodbye, not to Jordan, not to the receptionist, not even to the elevator, which for weeks had carried her up to something that felt like hope. It felt strangely peaceful, painful, yes, but peaceful. Calder didn't find the letter until nearly 9 a.m. He was late, delayed by a call with London that ran longer than expected. He stepped into his office, drenched from the storm, shoulders taut from the fight he didn't know he'd already lost. He saw the envelope instantly. His name wasn't on it, but somehow he knew. He sat down, took a breath, and read. Calder. There are 100 versions of this letter I could have written. Some angry, some poetic, some that beg, some that bleed. But this one is just honest. I came into your life through a revolving door, expecting to be spit back out like the rest. You didn't ask for me. I didn't plan to stay. But something happened, something neither of us could quite name. And for a moment, I thought maybe this could be different. But you're still fighting ghosts, Calder. Ghosts I can't see, and battles I'm not allowed to name. And I'm still someone learning not to settle for silence dressed as love. So I'm choosing myself, not because I don't care, but because I do. I hope one day, when you're ready to stop watching the world through glass, you'll remember how it felt to be seen. Hannah Calder didn't move for a long time after reading it. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something quieter broke. He had always believed he was built for solitude. That connection was a liability, not a necessity. That feelings were distractions best buried under success and structure. But Hannah had made him believe, if only for a flicker, that maybe there was more. And now she was gone. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. At noon, Miranda appeared, uninvited, as usual. She entered his office like it still belonged to her, her heels sharp against the floor, her hair pristine despite the weather. "Have you seen the press this morning?" she asked, waving a folded newspaper. "The article's been syndicated. International eyes are on you." He didn't look up. Calder. She left. Miranda blinked. "Who?" He finally met her gaze. "Hannah." Miranda paused, then gave a soft sigh. "Oh, that's unfortunate." He said nothing. "She seems sweet," Miranda added, perching on the edge of his desk. "But let's be honest, this was always temporary." Calder stood suddenly, sharp, controlled, furious. "No," he said. "That's exactly the lie I let myself believe." Miranda narrowed her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," he said, stepping closer, "you've spent your whole life convincing people that connection is leverage, that love is strategy. And I let you convince me, too. Calder, I'm done." His voice was calm now, final. "You're off the board. Effective immediately." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You can't." "I already did." He walked to the door, opened it wide, and this time, it was Miranda who left in silence. By sunset, the storm had passed. The sky over Chicago was streaked in orange and lavender, soft like the memory of something that might still be saved. Calder sat at his desk, the letter still open. Hannah's words etched into his mind. He thought of her laugh, of the way she annotated life with quiet observations, of the kiss on the balcony, and then he did something he hadn't done in years. He reached for his phone, not to schedule, not to delegate, but to find her. At that very moment, Hannah sat by her window in a small cafe on the edge of Logan Square, notebook open, tea cooling beside her. She had just posted her first blog entry. Confessions of a ghostwriter, anonymously, of course, but the words were hers, all of them. She stared at the blinking cursor, unsure if anyone would read it. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hannah came Calder's voice, low but steady. "I didn't think you'd call. I almost didn't." "Then why did you?" "Because I read your letter. And I realized I don't want to watch the world anymore." Silence, then a quiet, shaken breath. "Where are you?" he asked. "Logan Square. Corner cafe. The one with the string lights. Stay there." And for the first time, she didn't run. She waited. The cafe smelled like cardamom and rain. Hannah Blake sat near the window, notebook open, the edges of the pages curling slightly from the steam of her untouched tea. Outside, Logan Square moved at its usual pace, slow enough to breathe, fast enough to matter. It had been 3 weeks since she walked away from Glass Rock Tower. 3 weeks since she left behind a job, a story, a man. And somewhere in that silence, something beautiful had begun to grow. Her blog, Confessions of a Ghostwriter, had taken off almost accidentally. What started as a personal archive of unpublished thoughts had caught fire online. Comments poured in, readers connecting with her voice, her metaphors, her honesty. Some said her words felt like they had reached into their chests and pulled out things they'd never dared name. Hannah didn't write for validation, but the response reminded her that her voice didn't need a podium to be powerful. It only needed to be hers. The door to the cafe jingled. She didn't look up right away, not until she heard the quiet voice. "Still no sugar in your tea." She turned, and there he was, Calder Reed. Not in a suit, no tie, no power stance, just Calder, plain charcoal sweater, rain-dampened hair, eyes that carried less armor than she remembered. "No sugar," she said, softly, still bitter, like the truth. He gave a quiet nod. "Then, may I sit?" She gestured to the seat across from her. He sat. For a few long seconds, they didn't speak. The air between them was heavy, but not sharp, not angry, just full of things neither knew how to unpack. "I read every word," he said finally. "The blog, your posts. The line about loneliness, dressed in press suits, that one stayed with me." She closed her notebook. "Did it make you mad?" "No. It made me want to write again." She blinked. "I even bought a notebook," he added. "Haven't opened it yet. But it's there." Hannah exhaled a laugh, more surprised than amused. "And Miranda gone," he said. "Board seat revoked, office emptied, future not discussed." She nodded slowly. "I'm not here to pull you back into that world," he added. "You made a choice. A brave one. I came because I wanted to tell you what your leaving taught me." She looked up. "It taught me that silence isn't strength, that withholding isn't noble, that if I care about someone, I need to tell them, not when it's convenient, not when I've calculated the risk, but when it matters." She didn't respond. Not yet. So he leaned in slightly. "I care about you, Hannah." Her throat tightened. "I don't know if I deserve a second chance, but if there's still a space in your life, one that isn't waiting for me to be perfect, I'd like to be there." The cafe quieted around them. The music shifted to a soft jazz tune. A woman behind the counter hummed along. Hannah looked at Calder, really looked, not as the man who'd once hidden behind power, but as someone learning to show up anyway. And she smiled. "I'm not interested in perfect," she said. "Good," he replied. "I left that version of me in the office." Later. They walked in silence down the street. No hand-holding, no declarations. Just two people who had learned to speak the same language the hard way. Before they parted ways at the corner, he turned to her. "Will you keep writing?" She nodded. "Always. And if I wrote something, just one page, would you read it?" "I'd love to." He paused. "I never got to say it," he added. "Back then." "Say what thank you for seeing me. Even when I didn't see myself?" She didn't say you're welcome. She just touched his hand, briefly. And in that single touch, something unspoken passed between them. Not a promise, but a beginning. The first snowfall came earlier than expected. It drifted down over Chicago like whispered confetti, softening sharp edges, covering the city in something that felt like forgiveness. Hannah Blake stood on the rooftop of her new apartment building, wrapped in a wool coat, notebook in hand. Her fingers were cold, but her thoughts were clear. She wrote under the muted sky. Some stories don't need dramatic endings. Some just need quiet beginnings, steady chapters, and the courage to turn the page. Below her, the city moved like it always had, impatient, beautiful, flawed. She had submitted her first official book proposal last week, a memoir, part fiction, part truth, rooted in everything she'd lived, everything she'd learned. She hadn't told many people, but Calder knew. He had been the first person to read the outline and the first to write in the margins, "This is yours. Don't let anyone revise it out of you." They hadn't defined what they were now. No labels, no declarations. But every Saturday, he showed up at her door, sometimes with books, sometimes with bad coffee, always with eyes that asked, "Can I stay a little longer this time?" And she always let him in. Not because she needed him to complete her, but because she knew she could stand on her own and still choose someone who saw her clearly. That night, Calder arrived with 2 scarves and a pair of mismatched gloves. "You still forget yours," he said, handing her the woolly bundle. "Some things haven't changed. Some things have," she replied, smiling. They sat side by side, watching the snow fall in silence. And when he reached for her hand this time, she didn't hesitate. She laced her fingers through his, softly, simply, like turning a page. As we grow older, we learn that love isn't always loud, and connection doesn't always come wrapped in certainty. Sometimes it's found in quiet gestures, hesitant conversations, or in the simple presence of someone who stays when things get uncomfortable. This story reminds us that it's never too late to reclaim our voice, to walk away from what dims our light, and to choose tenderness over perfection. Whether in relationships, careers, or within ourselves, the power to begin again rests not in age, but in the courage to ask, "What do I truly deserve?" For those who have loved deeply, lost quietly, or lived too long in someone else's shadow, this story is a gentle hand on your back. It says, you are not invisible. You are not too late. You still get to choose. So even if life has weathered you with years and wisdom, may you never stop choosing what's real. Love that listens, honesty that holds, and peace that doesn't need to be explained. Because healing isn't just for the young, it's for the brave at any age. Thank you for spending your precious time with this story. If it touched your heart, made you reflect, or simply stayed with you for a moment, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who might need it, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, inspire, and connect.